July 7th to order, and we'll start out with the calling of the roll.
Roll call. Mr. Rod Axtell.
Here.
Present. Mr. Jack Beloga. Not present. Mr. Ronald Barnes.
Here.
Present. Mr. James Goodermont.
Here.
Present. Miss Kathy Gustafson.
Present.
Present. Miss Cynthia Hunt.
Present.
Present. Miss Bronna Lindell. Present. Mr. Thomas Nelson. Not present. Mr. Grant Peterson. Not present. Mr. Steve Peterson.
Here.
Mr. John Stanley. Not present. Mr. Jay Taylor.
Present.
Present. Mr. Mark Thorson. Not present. Miss Carrie Weatherby. Not present. Miss Nicole Kohler. Present.
Thank you. With 8 people being present, we have a quorum for the meeting, and we'll move on to the one item that's on the agenda tonight, which is item number 2.1, which is considering a resolution acknowledging receipt of a petition for a charter amendment related to ranked choice voting. I'll ask the staff to make a short presentation.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here tonight. I'm Melissa Manderscheid, the Charter Commission attorney. I'm joined by Peter Zuniga, who is the Deputy City Attorney and is an attorney in our office. And the City Clerk, Christina Scipione, is also present. I believe she's over in The Hague now, but will be coming back. So there she is, and here she is. So I have a couple of slides tonight. I thought it would be helpful to reorient everyone with where we're at and why we're here tonight. So with that, next slide. So the city charter amending process, as you all probably remember, is set forth in state law. And it provides a set limit on the number of ways you can amend the city charter. We've done it as a group a couple of different ways. The way that we are here talking about tonight is by a petition that is described and set forth in the city, in state law, in the city charter provision of state law, chapter 410. So the charter petition, or the petition to amend the charter, was received on June 21st by the city clerk. State law requires that it be transmitted to the recording secretary in order to start the process. So the next day, it was transmitted to the recording secretary, which is Adrian, who you're all familiar with. He's here tonight. Thereafter, the chair of the Charter Commission was notified, Mr. Steve Peterson. That's pursuant to our rules of procedure for our Charter Commission. And the chair called a special meeting. And we're here tonight with the sole task, an administrative task, of acknowledging receipt of the petition. This is a statutorily required step in the process. And you'll see that again, July 7th. This is our special meeting. We're having a special meeting because this is not our regular meeting schedule. That's why it's a special meeting. And as such, we're limited in discussing only the items on the agenda because it's a special meeting. Thereafter, tomorrow, the recording secretary, Adrian, he will notify the city clerk and the city council of the action that was taken this evening. And that will then start the next phase of the process. With that, next slide. So according to state law, the clerk has 10 days to determine the sufficiency of the petition. The clerk will be looking at the signatures received, whether they're properly attested, and the number of signatures, whether they meet the threshold that's in state law. The clerk is required to certify the results of her examination, of the clerk's examination, to the city council. So that 10-day period is July 18th. The information will actually be included in the packet a few days prior to that when the packet is released. Just want to note for the record that we have an additional commissioner here, Commissioner Carrie Weatherby, 705. All right. The other part of the consideration is a legal requirement that, that is out there in case law that talks about whether, there's sort of two parts to it, right? The sufficiency of the petition, and then the action that's being requested has to be constitutional. It can't be preempted and has to be consistent with state law and public policy in order for it to be placed on the ballot. So if it's not, if it doesn't meet those requirements in case law, then the recommendation to the council will be that it is not consistent, and that the council should reject the petition for whatever of those reasons that might possibly come into play. Next slide.
Jack is on. Go ahead.
All right, so I thought it would be helpful to list some of the relevant state law provisions that come into play here. On this statute, you see, this is from state law, chapter 410.12, and this talks about the proposals. It's a 5% of the total votes cast in the last general election, which the city clerk, I'm sure, knows that number.
55,361 votes were cast in the last statewide general election, and 5% of that is 2,769.
2,769.
Correct.
It was received 17 weeks. And just want to note for the record that Commissioner Thorson has just arrived, 7:06.
Send that out.
You win.
All right, next slide. This is the next relevant provision in state law related to the petition. This is talking about the 10-day requirement that we just discussed and the requirements of such certification. So this will be done in a resolution. Those results of the city clerk's examination will be set forth in a resolution, and the council will receive that. Next slide. The last part that I thought would be relevant to talk about is the election. And this is in subdivision 4 of the statute. This talks about the form of the ballot. The city council will set the language of the question. Those of you that have been involved in city government in the past couple of years will probably remember how that process works. There's language in there that we have to identify what's happening in the question sufficiently so that people can understand what they're voting for. And state law sets a requirement of 51% in order to adopt a city ballot question to amend the city charter. There's a specific requirement there in state law. And then there's language about when the amendment would take effect. So in this case, it says, the state law says it would take effect 30 days from the date of the election, which would be sometime in November, or excuse me, December. All right. I thought it would also be helpful for everyone, and I'm sorry that's a little bit small, helpful for everyone to be reminded of where we have traveled with regard to ranked choice voting in the city of Bloomington. So back in May of 2020, the commission and the city council took action related to amending the city charter. And then in November, there was a ballot question in 2020. Thereafter, in 2021, there were ordinances that were adopted by the city council to implement ranked choice voting. And there was a cleanup to charter section 4.04 that addressed a clarifying amendment to related to write-in candidates and a related sort of clarification that was discovered during the process. And then in November of 2021, we had the election that used ranked choice voting. So with regard to the petition that was received a couple of weeks ago, I thought it would be helpful to break down the various parts of it. It's in your packet. There are 4 different amendments that are sought as a package amendment. And the first one is amending 4.02. This section deals with primary elections. It was previously a part of our city charter, and this particular petition is seeking to restore the language that was previously removed from the city charter when ranked choice voting was enacted. If you recall, the ranked choice voting implementation eliminated the need for a primary election. So if the charter is amended as proposed in the petition, a primary would be required again. All right, the next section 4.04 addresses filing of candidates. And this seeks to restore the language that was previously in the city charter. And it does not reflect the clarifications that were done in June of 2021 to address write-in candidates. So we would need to do some cleanup if this petition language goes into effect in order to create write-in candidates as is allowed under state law. 4.07 deals with procedures at elections. And this is potentially needed to be amended to be consistent with city ordinances would need to be amended to be consistent with this petition if it is adopted by the voters. And then the last section 4.08 is a prohibition on ranked choice voting. It is putting forward a 2/3 vote requirement at a future election in order to have ranked choice voting in the city of Bloomington. I wanted to point out to you that we're looking into the legality of that because state law states that city ballot questions only require 51% in order to amend the charter. So this is placing a different vote requirement for a charter amendment. So I wanted to let this group know that we're looking into that and to see if we can move forward with it. And we've drafted an opinion to a request for an opinion to the Minnesota Attorney General that after you all take action tonight, that we would submit it tomorrow, seeking an opinion from the AG about whether we can proceed forward with a 2/3 vote requirement in our city charter. All right. Any questions before we move on to the next slide?
On number 7, where you went through the timeline,
Oh, slide number 7? Sure, one back. Yep.
and it says charter amendments requesting voter approval to amend chapter 4. I don't think this commission recommended that, right? It was through the city council.
Correct. That is correct. That was the city council ordinance amendment. Correct. Yep. It was done by ordinance.
Mhm.
All right. So last, I thought it would be,
The last point,
Right.
the Attorney General should indicate that that is, should not move forward, that 2/3 vote. Would the rest of the petition move forward, or would the proposal would have to be modified?
Sure.
Just that one portion.
Chair and commissioners, we would have to look into that. It would really depend on what the Attorney General's opinion is. Oftentimes, there are very nuanced questions, and the question that we proposed to the Attorney General in draft right now is very nuanced. And so our response to your question would likely depend on what the AG said. And even if the AG is willing to give us an opinion.
Any other questions before we go to the next steps? Okay, go ahead.
All right, so with regard to next steps, again, a reminder that tonight, the action that we're asking the Charter Commission to take is administrative. It puts into motion the next steps. And so that's tonight, July 7th. You'll acknowledge receipt of the petition, and you'll do that, you're being asked to do that by adopting the resolution that's in the packets. We are proposing and recommending that this clerk determination that's required under state law be done on July 18th. Again, it'll appear in the packet, which comes out a couple of days before then, but it would be received formally at the city council meeting on July 18th. And then if there is ballot language that would move forward, it would likely be adopted on either August 8th or August 15th because ballot language is due to the county on August 26th. So the council, if you can remember from past discussions, there is sometimes some discussion amongst the city council members. So again, it would depend on how soon we could get back an opinion from the AG, as well as do our own additional research on the questions that we have. And then we would be moving forward with the next steps in the process. So if everything moves along, then it would be on the ballot in November for the general election.
Commissioner Barnes.
If the last paragraph is probably in violation of state law, why would we proceed until we know whether it's whether we know the answer to that question?
Yeah, Ms. Manishek.
Chair and members, again, I appreciate that. That's a very reasonable question. We wanted to bring it up tonight, even though tonight's action is administrative, given how tight the timeframes are. We didn't want anybody to be surprised by it or otherwise wonder why didn't they mention that at the Charter Commission meeting. And so we wanted to mention it to you all tonight that we were looking into that element. And so again, tonight is a administrative step in the process and starts the additional steps that would need to be taken. So that is why we're moving forward. And again, we're meeting tonight, which is as soon as we could pull together a quorum. So some people might wonder why we didn't meet, a couple of days earlier. Well, we had the 4th of July holiday. People's schedules were already in motion, and the recording secretary worked diligently to try and find a date that worked for people, acknowledging also the timing of the 10 days element of it too. So my recommendation and request tonight would be that you adopt the resolution that's in the packet.
Just one kind of follow up on Commissioner Barnes' question. Is it true that state law assigns the responsibility around that constitutionality decision to the city council? Is that where that's at in state law?
Chair and members, that constitutionality question is in case law.
In case law, okay. Okay, cool. Any other questions regarding the process or the next step?
So
Commissioner Barnes.
the process goes to the city clerk to verify and validate the petition's accuracy.
Chair, maybe the clerk could talk a little bit about her process.
Yes, Commissioner Barnes and Chair. The next step in the process is for the city clerk's office to verify the names on the petition. And to do that, we utilize the statewide voter registration system and look up the voters by the name and the address that is provided on the petition to confirm. We also have a process in place to ensure that we are removing any duplicates from the total count of valid signatures. And we are also ensuring that the voters are currently registered within the city of Bloomington as required by the state statute.
Questions?
Is it just registered voters, or is it voters that actually voted at the last election? I mean, in order to qualify as a petitioner?
Chair Peterson and Commissioner Barnes, the statute says that it is registered voters in the city. It does not specify that they had to have voted in a previous election, but they need to be registered at the time we are reviewing the petition.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the staff?
Chair, I just might point out
Go
that
right
there,
ahead.
there is the petition at the end of the table there, if anybody's
Okay,
curious.
well,
It's
there it is, lo and
box
behold, at the end of the table.
Formally received.
Okay, so at this point then, oh, go ahead, Commissioner Axtell.
If no other questions, I'm more than glad to approve and send this charter amendment to the city council.
Okay, I hear motion as stated in the staff report and a second from Commissioner Hunt. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, it will then come to a vote. All those in favor of adopting the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries unanimously. That being the only item of business at our meeting, the meeting stands adjourned.
Motion.
No, wait.